Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Classroom podcast with OnCourse. On today's episode, we have Sanika Merchant, who's now finished her sophomore year at Wellesley College and is studying economics. Sarika, how's everything going?
It's going well. I'm currently in my sophomore summer, so I'm working for the summer. I'm working at a company called Prudential, which is based in New Jersey, and I'm living
Yeah,
in New York. So it's been sort of exciting exploring the city and exploring a different place and just getting to meet some new people.
it's nice to see that your summer's going well in New York so far. How did you actually land up getting this internship?
Sure. So I was talking to a Wellesley alum who was working in the same place that I worked in last year. And
Hmm.
she was sort of telling me about her career trajectory. And she told me a little bit about, finance. And coming from a liberal arts college, I didn't really think that finance was a path that I could go down. I always thought that I'd end up in, a role with the government or end up working for a think tank. But when I sort of, heard her story and heard her experiences, I thought finance was a good sort of industry to look at and explore.
Hmm.
And then I sort of, networked with a couple more Wellesley alums, and, Prudential sort of came along because they had a career fair. They were part of a career fair with us at Wellesley. And I went up to the representatives there, I spoke to them, and that's sort of how I realized that this might be something nice to try out. And that's how I landed the internship with them.
That's really good. I feel like that's, the most organic way to do it also,
Mhm.
by having that sort of network through the college itself, and then, actually ending up finding something that you like. I know we were chatting about this a little while ago, but how have you enjoyed the quantitative aspect of it? Because I remember when working with you, maybe that was not the first thing you thought of.
Yeah, definitely. So I am currently in market risk reporting and analysis, which basically means that we look at macroeconomic factors like interest rates and foreign exchange. And we also look at the equities market and we sort of see how that is impacting the investments of the company. And it's been a lot of data analysis. It's been very, very technical. And so the learning curve has been steep. But I've enjoyed it because I've learned a lot, and I definitely feel like going forward, I'd like to also try something that's a little more qualitative. But at the same
Hmm.
time, I'm happy that I'm in such a technical role because I'm really getting to learn some new skills, push myself a little, and try something new because I don't think I would have done this otherwise. I
Yeah.
just got placed into this team and I'm really happy I did because it's, again, pushing me to try something I wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it's in many ways, I guess it's an extension almost of the whole liberal arts spirit of exploration. Even if, finance may not necessarily be part of the liberal arts, it's definitely a real world application of, those social science subjects or those mathematical subjects. And you also have something else coming up next year with RBC, I believe. So,
Yeah.
what will that be, a similar role? Will that be something different?
Mhm. Yeah, so next year I will be working with RBC in their equity research division. And so that'll definitely be a little more qualitative because it'll be a combination of, writing and communication skills, but also modeling and other technical skills. And I'm looking forward to exploring that because that'll sort of be, a little more aligned to my skill set in that I'll be able to harness my passion for writing, my passion for communication, and at the same time explore some modeling and more technical analysis.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Plus, having done a little work in this space myself, one thing I can tell you is, you'll make a lot of those models, which is absolutely key in terms of, having your fundamentals for whichever company you're researching. But there's so much of a qualitative element as well. Sometimes you might find that the financials of a particular company make it a really undervalued good investment. But there may be something qualitative that, makes you still not want to buy it. And it could go the other way around as well. Sometimes you might think that, okay, the financials don't really encourage me to invest in something, but there's a qualitative reason or there's a future projection, that can actually change your mind on that. So I feel like, knowing you might actually get the best balance of the quantitative and the qualitative side doing that. So I know it's still a year away, but good luck for that. I think you might enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. These are good things to explore, right? This is the point of an internship, I guess, at a very basic level. So I'm glad you started early. You've got one after the second year, you'll have one after the third, and then I guess it'll be time to not decide per se what you want to do all through your career, but maybe make a bit of an early decision in terms of what you want your first job to be in, which space you want it to be in. So that's good. I know, of course, that we do feature more college-related stuff on these podcasts, and I figured we just chat about the internship bit first, anyway. Obviously, you go to college at Wellesley, so it's not in New York. It's closer to Boston, about 25-30 minutes away. How have you liked that? How have you liked living in Wellesley as a town, and how have you liked being close to Boston as a city?
Sure, I have absolutely loved the balance of the two. And it's
Mhm.
interesting because Wellesley is the small suburban town and
Mhm.
Boston is a bustling, vibrant city. So I've really liked that combination of the two. Typically through the week, I'm in Wellesley, doing my classes, attending my student organization meetings, attending events on campus. And on the weekends, I typically take the bus to Boston. We have a shuttle running from Wellesley to Boston every half an hour. So that makes the city of Boston very accessible to us. And I've grown up in Mumbai, and so I really like that bustling city vibe. Some of my favorite things to do in Boston include, watching the absolutely gorgeous skyline, exploring the new restaurants in the city, and also just meeting new college students because Boston has so many different colleges. And so it's
Yeah.
very easy to meet new students and see what they're working on, what they're studying. And again, it's just been a lovely balance. And another good thing about Wellesley is that it allows us to cross register for classes at other colleges, some of
Yeah.
which are in the city.
Yes.
So we can cross register at MIT, Babson, Olin, and Brandeis.
Yeah.
And MIT is in the heart of Cambridge, and Babson and Olin are just a couple minutes away from
Five
us.
minutes drive, I would guess. Yeah.
Right, and Brandeis is in a neighboring town. And so it's also nice to be able to go to these new places and just sort of take classes there and get a different scene in some sense.
Yeah, no, these are some good towns. I mean, and Brandeis is in Waltham, which is where I studied as well. I was at Bentley.
Right.
But I feel like that whole area is full of students. And it's a pretty peaceful space also. Boston is not, it's not the loudest city in the world. And so, the buildings, I mean, there are a bunch of tall buildings, but a large part, especially if you go to the Cambridge area, um, you'll find it's very university-esque. It's a good place, definitely a good place to live. I spend a lot of time there myself. But that's good, to see that 2 years in, you've kind of made the most of that. You've been around the community a lot as well. Um, what's been like in general, being back at a women's, so Wellesley's of course a women's college. You started out in JB Pettit over here, which is a girls school. Then you had 2 years in the middle at Bombay International, which is co-ed.
Right.
So how's the shift back to the all girls all women's environment been?
It's very interesting because, I mean, thinking back to my time at JB, which is the all girls school in
Yeah.
Mumbai, I really enjoyed, that environment where I didn't have to worry about different gender norms and I could really speak my voice and just sort
Mm.
of, be confident in the best version of myself. At the same
Yeah.
time, I also loved BIS because that was a very different environment. Again, a lovely school. And it's interesting to sort of be back in that all women's environment. I think it's very special being in a new country and trying to pursue a field that's so male dominated. Um,
Mm.
Being in finance as a woman of color in the US is not easy for sure. But I think Wellesley just has given me the confidence to believe that I can be wherever I want to as long
Mm.
as I'm passionate about it and can work hard.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's also interesting because we can cross register with other colleges, and a lot of other college students come to Wellesley as well. So it's definitely, we definitely have a lot of co-ed classes, and I think it's a nice balance for sure. And as we talked about earlier, Boston has so many different colleges, and so I
Yeah.
never really felt sort of isolated in some sense.
Hmm.
It's
No,
always been a very, yeah, inclusive space.
yeah, no, absolutely. And it's also, I guess, a different, I mean, it is an all women's college, of course, but it doesn't mean that, people of other genders are not allowed on campus.
Mhm.
So in that sense, it's liberal. And also, I guess, this is also a difference between you being a much younger girl when you were at JB. Now you're sort of in that phase where, you have 2 more years of college left. You're deciding what you want to do in terms of your career. So maybe a different headspace, almost, takes you back in a certain way, but also in a different way, right? So that's good. That's nice that you've sort of had that combination of the two. um, but just generally speaking, Wellesley is also a much smaller school. It's in pretty much all these liberal arts colleges are. So other than the fact that, I know all the all women's colleges are super welcoming, has being, at a smaller school also made you feel, better about the whole thing settling in?
I definitely think so. And coming from a very small high school in Bombay, I
Yeah.
think I really wanted that close knit environment and that
Mhm.
small community.
Yeah.
And even our class sizes are pretty small. So we have lean class sizes ranging from about 10 to 20 students at max. And that's been great because I've really been able to stay engaged in the class, ask questions if I have any, and also get to know my peers and professors one on one. And
Yeah.
I think that's been very valuable because I really appreciate those meaningful relationships. In fact, just last semester, I was able to work on a research project with my professor.
Yeah.
This was my economics professor, and because I got to know her so well one on one, and I told her about my interest in economic development, she sort of roped me into a project pretty early on. And that was
Okay.
nice because I don't think I would have gotten that opportunity at maybe a
Without.
larger state school where class sizes are about 500 students a class or whatnot.
Especially, yeah, you're right. I mean, especially in the first year. This is why I tell a lot of kids, if you want a bigger state school, make sure you're going there for all the things that you'll have on those big campuses. Whereas if you're very into what your everyday classroom experience will be like, if you want to be closer to your professors, then consider a smaller school. And I feel like you've always maybe had that preference. Not that doesn't mean, of course, that smaller campuses don't have resources. Wellesley is a very connected school. Yes, it's small, but very connected. They also have, as you mentioned earlier, these connections with other universities if you want to register for another class somewhere else. So I feel like that worked out well. I don't know if you'd have had the same networking, you'd have had some of these experiences you've had at a bigger school. Were you ever sort of considering that, or was it always smaller colleges?
I definitely think I was considering bigger colleges at one point, also because there was a lot of pressure from, my relatives and friends to look at the bigger names or look at maybe the Ivy Leagues or whatnot.
Hmm.
But I knew that it was important for me to find a place where I could really thrive and
Hmm.
not just find a place for the name, because I knew I would be spending the next 4 years of my life there. And it's important to find a place where you're going to be comfortable and where you're going to really be able to be your best self, because I think that's the point of college. You want to go there and feel like you belong, and you want to go there and feel successful and feel like you can really thrive in that environment. So I think while I was considering the bigger schools, I always knew that I'd do well in a smaller liberal arts college, and so I sort of shifted. And I think you and Amira were pretty critical in helping me make that decision, because I remember we spoke about fit versus, just going after the names or rankings. And I think that's so important in the long run.
Yeah, fair enough. I feel like you sort of, when you started working with us, you sort of were already a little bit in that direction. And then maybe we just had to reconfirm it a few times before we did the early decision. So yeah, I think in the end it was the right move. And since we're on this topic, and a big part of feeling like you belong in a college or in a community, or just feeling settled in a new place, it depends on the people you live with, and your roommates, your floor mates. How was that? So what was your living situation in your freshman year at Wellesley? Were you in a dorm with a roommate? Was it a single room?
Sure. So at Wellesley, and I'm guessing a lot of other liberal arts
Yeah.
colleges, you typically live on campus all 4 years.
Yeah.
And my freshman year, I picked my roommate over Facebook because we had a Wellesley Facebook group.
Hmm.
And so that's sort of how, my roommate and I got talking. And we, moved into a dorm room together. But she actually left to go to another college my first week in college. And so that
Oh
was
wow.
pretty hard because, I
Yeah.
mean, she was my first friend on campus.
Yeah.
And she was a domestic student. She was from Kansas and she
Okay.
moved back. And so I was, pretty devastated because I was like, my first friend on campus is
Hmm.
moving away. And so in that week, I remember feeling very lost and isolated. And it was also hard making friends as an international student, as somebody who had just come to a new country, to a new place.
Hmm.
And I think, and then I sort of, got matched with another roommate randomly. And
Okay.
and so she moved in, I think, a month after my earlier roommate left. And
Okay.
again, she was a domestic student from Pennsylvania, so a very different context. But it was
Hmm.
lovely getting to know her, and we just became good friends after. We, get dinner together sometimes. We go out into the city, and it was lovely, sort of, learning about her experiences growing up, and
Hmm.
I told her about mine, and we just sort of, had a lot in common, but also a lot in different. And I think that was the most beautiful part of it because we just got to learn so much from each other. And it was also, great making a new friend eventually.
Yeah, no, I mean I didn't know that actually. So that's a pretty unique first month of college to have your own sort of double room to yourself.
Right,
Um,
for sure.
right, and then you have somebody new moving in, but luckily it was somebody that you got along with. And in the interim, was your floor pretty active? Like, were you friends with other people in the same dorm?
Yeah, so I think Wellesley does a great job sort of making residential life a space where students can find a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So we would have weekly, like floor meetings and weekly residence hall meetings where all
Mm.
residents of a certain hall would just come together and talk about their week or engage in
Yeah.
different activities, have hot chocolate together during the winters. So that was really nice because I got to meet other people from my floor and from my year, but also from other class years. And that was
Mm.
really nice because I remember, the seniors would just look out for me, just check in on me, make sure I was okay. Especially since I was living so far away from home. And
Yeah.
it was also nice to just make, new friends on my floor because sometimes in the nights, they would come over to my room. We just watch movies together. We also had a lot of common spaces in the residence halls. So, we'd often study together in those common spaces. And that was nice because I never really felt alone. And I always felt like I could, call someone if I needed something, or I could just go to my friend's room if I was feeling lonely in the night.
Yeah, the dorms never feel alone. I feel like that's the one good thing about them is you'll never feel like there's nobody there. If anything, it might get too noisy sometimes. But but no, that's good. That's good to see that you assimilated well first year, and of course, then you had a second year where you can plan out your whole roommate thing a bit more. So how did that work out?
Sure. So my sophomore year, I actually ended up rooming with one of my really good friends from a class at Wellesley.
Okay.
And I didn't want to room with one of my best friends at Wellesley because I thought that, it can sometimes get a little complicated where friendships and roommate relationships can sort of, cross over. And I was worried about there being a conflict. But, the friend I roomed with, we just got so close eventually. And we're rooming again next year, which is lovely. And we also realized that we had a lot of friends in common, which we didn't
Yeah.
know about earlier. So it just
Oh,
became, very exciting because we'd always have our friends over to our room. Our room sort of became like the, common space to hang out.
mhm.
And that was
Yeah.
nice because we always had people over and we'd always, plan like movie nights or dinners together. And that was just amazing and so much fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's the whole thing. I feel like so many people don't realize how little time you actually spend in class every week, right? It's a lot less busy than what it might be in high school, where you have a full morning to sort of early evening day. Whereas this is like, some days you may have 2 hours of class, maybe three, maybe four. It doesn't usually go too much beyond that. So, the time you spend on campus, maybe in the cafeteria, maybe in your dorm, is valuable. You don't want to just waste that alone or doing nothing productive. So yes, it's super important getting in that community properly. And I'm glad you did. What we usually do, because we're sort of coming to the end of the episode, what we usually do is we'll ask you a few quick fire questions, although mine are notoriously not quick. I usually just let you take whatever time you need to answer it. So by all means, feel free to do that. I have 5 questions ready for you. Let's start with so far, who's been your favorite professor at Wellesley?
I think my favorite professor at Wellesley has been a professor whose name is Smita Radhakrishnan. She's a
Okay.
South Asian American sociology professor, and she's also an author, Bharatanatyam dancer, activist, and a bunch of other things, which is pretty cool, honestly. And I remember my freshman year of college, I took a sociology class because I needed to, fill in one class, and it just sounded interesting. And I
Yeah.
knew my cousin majored in sociology, but I had no idea what that was. I just
Right.
took it because it sounded cool. And I was always, an economics and political science geek. So sociology was not something on the radar. But I took it anyway. And I remember that first sociology class, we were talking a lot about how race, class, and gender impact, human society and the economy,
Yeah.
especially the South Asian community in the US. And I thought that was fascinating because, I'd never really stopped to consider these things in an academic framework. And that's when I realized that this is something I wanted to do with economics. Um, and even the conversations I've had with Professor Radhakrishnan outside of the classroom during office hours were really cool because we
Yeah.
talk a lot about, the labor market and unemployment and what that means for the South Asian community in the US. We spoke a lot about poverty alleviation and economic development and so many different things that I never knew could fall under the realm of sociology. And beyond that, again, she's a Bharatanatyam dancer. She's written a couple of books, and she's just such a fun and passionate person to be around. And I think, yeah, she inspires me a lot. And so I think she's
Fantastic.
one person I've really looked up to during my time at Wellesley.
Fantastic. Fantastic. It's nice to have somebody who can almost be, other than a professor, we feel like almost a mentor. Um, so, I'm glad you've already found that person, possibly.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Next question. Similar lines, but this question is, what's the most unique class that you've taken at Wellesley so far?
I think the most unique class I've taken is Introduction to Cinema and Media Studies. Again,
Okay.
as an economics and sociology double major, I never knew I'd end up taking cinema and media studies. And it was very interesting because we spoke a lot about how technology and the media space is evolving in the contemporary age. And we had class thrice a week, and twice we talk about you know different concepts and theoretical frameworks. And once a week, we'd watch a movie in class. So we watched everything from Crazy Rich Asians to Parasite to Don't Look Up. We even watched a documentary by Mark Zuckerberg on virtual reality. And I thought
Hmm.
that was pretty interesting because, I never knew that cinema and media studies could revolve so around technology. And what was funny was I was in, a banking interview at one point, and I
Yeah.
was interviewing for a tech banking role. And we just ended up talking about my cinema and media studies class for a good 20 minutes, which was so funny because who would have thought that things can be so intersectional in some way. So I think that class also, was not only helpful because it was something different, but it
Yeah.
also gave me a good perspective on how the technology and media landscape is changing and how factors like, again, race, class, and gender can impact that.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good one. Also, I just feel like interviews can throw up some of the most who would have thought moments,
For
because
real.
at the end of the day, it's another person interviewing you, and they may have some common points of topic that can go with yours. And you never know. Sometimes they actually help you get a job, internship, whatever it might be, and you would have never thought, that would be the topic that broke the ice or whatever. So that's interesting. Okay, next question. Have you ever jumped into the Wellesley Lake?
I did my freshman year actually. So this was, I want to say, my first or second day of orientation. And I remember in the night, our residence hall leader sort of told us to gather in the common space. And they said, just follow us. We can't tell you where we're taking you, but you just have to
Mhm.
follow us. This was about 9 p.m. and we had no idea what was happening. Again, it was my second night of orientation. So I was, so confused, and we sort of ended up at the lake and everyone just jumped into the lake and everyone was having fun, having a good time. There was music, and you know it just made me realize how college is also made up of small fun moments that you take advantage of in the moment. So
Mhm.
I feel like, yeah, I did end up jumping into the lake, but I haven't done it since. But it is a Wellesley tradition to go swimming in the lake at least once during your time at Wellesley. So I'm hoping to do that at some point in the next 2 years.
Maybe 2 days before you graduate, so you
Probably.
have like a nice beginning and ending jump, I guess. What would you say has been your favorite food on campus so far?
So, Wellesley is definitely known for its ice cream, and every dining hall has, such a wide selection of ice creams. And it hasn't been great for the amount of sugar I've eaten in the past 2 years. But it's
Hmm.
definitely been very cool trying out new flavors. We have a birthday cake flavor, a raspberry sorbet, which is one of my favorites. The cookies and cream is an all time classic, and we have Grand Central Station. We have a bunch of really interesting flavors. And I think
Okay.
that's been my favorite. Also, because a lot of the times I used to take ice cream from the dining halls and go with my friends for a walk around the lake. And that was
Hmm.
just a really nice thing to do, especially in the fall, towards the end of the semester when things would get very stressful. So I think that's been one of my
Was
favorite things I've
was
done.
that was that a great time to eat ice cream in
It
December?
was not, especially in the winters and in the fall. It's
Hmm.
not a great time because it gets so cold. Sometimes the temperature will go down to negative 15, negative 16. But for some reason, we still all go back to the ice cream after food, which is really funny. But it's just been something that's been a highlight of my Wellesley experience.
Fantastic. Okay, and last question. I don't know if you'll have to think too much about this. Maybe you will. Who knows? But who's your favorite Wellesley alum?
That's a good question because there's so many. Um, I think this is definitely, one of the most popular answers, but it was definitely something that, I thought a lot about when applying to Wellesley. In fact, she was one of my first introductions to Wellesley. I have to say Hillary Clinton, just because I feel like she's shattered a lot of glass ceilings, and
Hmm.
I think her confidence and strength and resilience have always stood out to me, especially when she ran for elections in 2016. I remember just being in awe of the confidence and resilience that she displayed. So she's definitely been one of my favorite alums, but another one has been one of my family friends who graduated Wellesley in 2013. So she told me about Wellesley in grade 6 or grade 7, I want to say. And
Hmm.
at the time, I was too young to think about college, and I didn't know that this was where I'd end up. But
Yeah.
again, I remember the way she spoke to me and the passion with which she spoke about Wellesley and its community and its resources. And she was also doing investment banking at the time. And again, I was too young to understand what all of this meant. But I think, again, just the passion she had and the way she sort of paved her way for herself, like so independently, despite being a woman in the US who had moved away from home for college. And I think I was very inspired by her personality and just again the glass ceilings that she had shattered and the way she made it for herself in some way. And so yeah, these two people have definitely been beacons of inspiration for me as I navigate my time at Wellesley. And I've sort of taken their pearls of wisdom and tried to navigate and carve my own path.
Fantastic. Has Hillary Clinton ever been on campus since you've been there?
So not since I've been there, but she's definitely visited campus a couple times. And who
Hmm.
knows, I might run into her in the next 2 years. That
Yeah.
would be lovely. But let's see.
Okay. Yeah. Who knows? I think the odds are that it might happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't. Depends on when she last visited. But I feel like she's the type who might go back.
Yeah, no, definitely. And she speaks very fondly about Wellesley, which is also very humbling to hear because she's done a couple of, interviews and whatnot. And in them, she's spoken about how Wellesley was a very important factor in her decision to join the government and to also just chase after the roles she did. And she said that Wellesley gave her the confidence to really put herself out there. And I think I feel the same way, where if it weren't for Wellesley, I probably wouldn't have pushed myself as much or had the confidence to step outside of my comfort zone, try new things, go into things like finance or econ, which are so hard to get into, especially as a woman in the US. So, yeah, I definitely echo that sentiment.
Fair enough. Okay, cool. So, I mean, it was great chatting with you, Sanika. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Hopefully, you'll come here in August and we'll meet. You come see the office. And yeah, I think we'll close the session here. So, thank you so much.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me and looking forward to seeing everyone in OnCourse back in August, I guess.